Firstly, I would like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you today from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects to elders past and present, and recognise their continuous connection to country and culture. I'm Aviva Tuffield, and I'm very excited about UQP's poetry list for 2021. First up is the just published Evelyn Araluen with her fiercely brilliant Drop Bear, in which Evelyn interrogates the colonial project and calls out its bullshit on a political and personal level. There is a particular focus on Australiana and its tropes and iconography, and on identifying and ridiculing its hypocrisy. Then we have Eling Chong's latest collection, 1,000 Crimson Blooms, which is her best yet. Full of sensuous imagery and complex emotions, it deals with such themes as mother-daughter relationships and the challenges of infertility. In June, we have Tony Birch's stunning poetry collection, Whisper Songs, which traverses the highly personal and the deeply political and their overlaps. Some of these poems are the closest thing Tony will ever come to writing a memoir. He also challenges this past to speak up by interrogating the historical archive, including documents from his own family history. In July, I'm thrilled to be publishing Maria Takalanda's latest collection, which is as mercurial as it is devastating. Trigger warning is not for the faint-hearted, but neither are the subjects it deals with, among which are domestic violence and environmental catastrophe. And last, but certainly not least, in September, we had the 2020 winner of the David Icon Award, Jazz Money's exceptional How to Make a Basket, which has a remarkable cover by Larrakia artist Jenna Lee, who also designed Drop Bears. How to Make a Basket is by turns scathing, funny, and lyrical. Jazz uses her poetry as an extension of protest against the violence of the colonial state and as a celebration of Black and queer love. Now to answer some questions I've been given. Firstly, what can an emerging early career poet do to improve the chances of their manuscript being accepted? I tell all writers, whether poets, novelists, or non-fiction authors, that the best way to get a publisher's attention is to get your work out there. So to enter competitions, submit poems to literary journals, apply for fellowships and mentorships. If you win, get shortlisted or published, your work will be noticed. And also you'll have something to add to your writing CV. You never know how or where a publisher might discover your work. And even if you don't win, one of the judging panel might have loved your work and may mention it to a publisher, such as me. Next question. If you could hear one poem before you go to sleep at night, what poem would that be? Well, recently, I have been hearing one poem almost nightly, as my youngest child in Year 8 has had to memorise and analyse a poem from a selection the school provided for an end-of-term assignment, and she chose Call a Spade by the incomparable Ellen Van Neerven. In fact, that is the perfect poem to reflect on each night, especially for me as a first-generation migrant to this colonised and unceded continent where I've experienced so many privileges, especially those of whiteness. Next question. Do you think it's advantageous to have a collection that has thematic links? I think almost all poets tend to have a certain number of preoccupations that flow through their work. So I would argue that most collections do have thematic links. I think it's advantageous to divide collections into sections if there are clearly linked poems, but it's not my first priority when considering publishing a work. In fact, I might be more concerned if a collection was too single-minded. Final question. Do you think poetry collections should be eligible for broader writing awards such as the Stella Prize? Full disclosure, I was one of the co-founders of the Stella, so I actually was one of the people who decided the genres that were included and to limit it to adult fiction, non-fiction, and YA. However, I clearly recall Aboriginal writer and academic Amberlynn Quay-Molina discussing this with me at the time and pointing out that this was a white Western delineation of genres and would exclude and disadvantage writers from certain backgrounds and cultural traditions. In particular, in terms of First Nations writers, Amberlynn advocated for picture books and books with a substantial number of images to be eligible. Subsequently, many other writers, often from non-white backgrounds, have pointed out the prominence and role of poetry in their cultural traditions, not least as a mode of protest and writing back. So speaking purely about the Stella Prize, if I was asked now, I would definitely be advocating for a broader range of genres to be eligible, including poetry, not least so that this brilliant book by a First Nations non-binary writer could have been considered for this year's prize. And that's where I'll end and say thank you for listening.